Hey there guys, and welcome to Tech Engineered. Today I'm going to be showing you how to clean up and rebuild a graphics card so that it might perform better thermally and might actually restore it if it isn't quite working properly. So let's get started. So first, let's go over the tools that you're going to need to complete this project. Of course, you're going to need the graphics card because you're going to want to rebuild it. You'll also need screwdrivers for any of the screws that will be required to remove the cooler and or cooler shroud. And I can't really tell you exactly which ones those are going to be because they're going to depend card to card. So I needed one screwdriver for my cooler, but you're just going to have to look and see what you're going to need to get the cooler off of there. And there are many different ways that they fasten these coolers to the cards. So you got to look out and make sure that you find all the screws that you're going to need to remove. Some cards can be rather complicated, or you could have a card like mine where it is super simple and just has 4 screws on it. You'll also need some thermal interface material, usually thermal compound that comes in a little syringe. I like using Arctic MX2. It is personally my favorite because it doesn't have a cure time. You can be up and running immediately. And it is also just really good performing, and that's kind of my favorite. It's also cheap. Arctic MX4 is also pretty good. It performs a little bit better, but hey, the 2 is cheap, and I can't tell a whole lot of difference between the two, so I usually stick with Arctic MX2. You'll also need an electrostatic discharge wristband. Now, this isn't like a necessity, but it is pretty good to have, especially when you're working with the internals of a component in your system. Generally with like computer builds, I won't wear one. I might do it just for when I'm putting together the motherboard, but that'll mainly be it. But when I'm messing with graphics cards and printed circuit boards and stuff, I like to wear one just in case. So you put that on, clamp the other side to something that's grounded, and it will prevent you from accidentally shocking the components on the card. So I'd recommend wearing one. I will in this video. You'll also need a can of compressed air so that you can dust the card off and get it all nice and clean. And you'll also need some rubbing alcohol, preferably above 70%. 90% is actually the best for the purposes we're going to be using it for, but make sure that's above 70 so that you can dissolve the existing thermal compound off of the card. Now let's get into the rebuild. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is put on your electrostatic discharge strap, and then we're going to try and remove the cooling system from the graphics card. So to do that, you take out the screws, pull it off. Be careful not to damage the fan connector by just trying to yank it off because the fans are probably plugged into the card, and then you disconnect those fan plugs, being careful not to damage them. They are going to be smaller than standard computer case fans, so just be careful. Give it some time, wiggle it a little bit, and try and get it off without damaging it. They can be kind of tricky, but just take your time and don't try and force anything, and you should be able to get the fan connector unplugged. Next, we're going to use compressed air to clean both sides of the card, just to get all the dust off of them, and we're also going to clean out the fins and fan and the cooler to make sure we get all the dust out of there. That's probably the most important part because that'll really help with thermals. And when you're using compressed air, you generally want to come at it from a shallow angle so that you make sure that you're not just blasting straight down on the card, and you also don't want to generally shoot air at it for any longer than about like 5 seconds, or at least until you see water condensing on it, because the air that's coming out of it is going to be very cold and it's going to cause water to condense onto the components, and you don't want water to get on there and corrode things, or if the water is still there whenever you turn it on, you could short things and damage the card. So be very careful of that. Do short bursts at a low angle to prevent water vapor from building up on the card, and yeah, just clean everything off with that compressed air. Now we can use some of the rubbing alcohol to dissolve the existing thermal compound off of the chip that's on the card, and also from the cooler that we removed from the card. And make sure you polish those, get them nice and shiny, so that when we put new thermal compound on, they have a nice surface to transfer heat from. So just make sure that those get super clean, because that'll actually help out a lot with thermals. Now we can apply the thermal compound, and for graphics cards you generally want to use a lot of thermal compound on them because they don't have a heat spreader like a CPU usually does. It's the actual like silicon chip is right there, so you want to make sure you get plenty on it so that it can dissipate the heat as best as possible. And don't worry about shorting out the components on the side so long as you're not using an electrically conductive thermal compound such as Arctic MX2. It's non-electrically conductive, so it is safe to kind of have overflow, and make sure that you get that chip absolutely covered. I generally try and do like a large P size on graphics cards. A lot of people complain, they're like, hey, that's too much, but you need a lot because it does not have a heat spreader on it. The next thing that we will do is replace the cooler back onto the card, and then plug everything in and let it set for a couple hours, because we want to make sure that the alcohol and any water vapor that did condense onto the card has time to evaporate. Then we simply plug it into a computer and test it to make sure that it still works, and then you have a newly rebuilt, kind of refurbished graphics card that will hopefully have a lot better cooling and will look cleaner because you'll clean all the dust off of it. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and leave a like on it. If you like the content on this channel, go ahead and subscribe. And if you have comments on future content that I can make, or comments about the content in this video, leave that in the comment section below, and I will see you guys in the next video. No.